This is the Strong as a Mindset podcast, episode number 195. If you've ever wondered things like how to structure your strength training, how heavy you should be lifting, or how to actually work up to a pull-up, you are not alone. These are questions I hear all the time, and today we're going to answer some of your most common strength training questions. This is the Strong as a Mindset podcast, where you'll learn how to build both a strong body and a strong mind by eating, moving, and thinking. I'm your host, physician, personal trainer, certified health coach, and certified life coach, Carrie Holland. Hey, how are you? What's new? What's good? So, what's good here? Well, over the last few months, I've been getting a lot of really good questions about strength training, some from my clients, some from my group coaching program, and even from a Facebook thread where someone tagged me. And some of these questions were so good and honestly so common that I thought it would make a good podcast episode. Because if one person is asking the question, chances are pretty good that a lot of other people are quietly wondering the same thing. So today we're doing something a little different. Today is a strength training Q&A episode. I'm going to walk you through some of the most common questions that I get about lifting weights. Things like how to go heavier, how to structure your workouts, how to protect your joints, and a few other things that tend to trip people up. And these are the kind of questions that don't always get answered very clearly, so I want to try to make this as clear as possible for you. If you lift weights, or if you're thinking about starting to strength train, this episode should be helpful for you. All right, so let's go. First, let's talk about how you actually get stronger. People often get confused about how to progress their strength training, and I want to clear this up. So I'm going to start with a question that comes up all the time, and that is, how do I get stronger when I'm not ready for the next dumbbell? This happens all the time. So dumbbells often jump in 2.5 or even 5-pound increments. And depending on the muscle being worked, that jump can feel enormous. So for example, if you're lifting 25 pounds and the next option is 30 pounds for something like a shoulder press, that can feel like a really big leap. The good news is that bumping up your weight is not the only way to progress. There are many other effective ways to get stronger, even when you're not quite ready to increase your load and go to the next weight. So first, you can add reps. If you're doing 3 sets of 8 reps, for example, bump it up to 3 sets of 10 reps. That increases the total work your muscles are doing, and it builds both strength and muscular endurance. You can also add sets. If you're doing 2 sets of an exercise, try doing 3. Or if you're doing 3, go for 4 sets. Same weight, same reps, just more total volume. And then the third option is what I call a bridge rep. So this is where you experiment with a heavier weight without committing to doing the entire set with it. So that means you might do the first few reps with the heavier weight. Then you switch back to your current weight to finish out the set. So you're still trying out the heavier weight, but you're not committing yourself to the entire set at the heavier weight. And what this does is it helps your nervous system learn what that heavier load feels like, but without overwhelming your body. And the point here is to not be afraid to try the heavier weight and think that you have to do the entire set with it. You can build up to it. You just have to be willing to try it out, safely, of course. And you have to be willing to put it down when your form starts to break down or when it gets too heavy. The only way you're going to know if you're ready for the next heavier dumbbell is by trying it, but that doesn't mean you overdo it. And the key take home here is to remember that getting stronger doesn't mean you have to immediately grab the next dumbbell. You can still progress by adding reps, adding sets, or experimenting with heavier loads that don't encompass your entire set until you're ready for the next weight. All right, the next question that comes up all the time is, how do I know if the weight I'm lifting is heavy enough? So a simple rule of thumb here is this. By the end of your set, you should feel like you've got 1 to 2 reps left in your tank. So not 10, not 5, maybe 1 or 2. If you finish your set and feel like you could easily do 4 to 6 more reps, that weight is probably too light for you. Then on the other hand, if you can't finish the set with good form, that means the weight is too heavy. If you feel that your back is overly arching, or if you have to change your posture to move the weight, that is a setup for injury and you should step it back. I cannot tell you how many times I've seen people lifting way too much weight and with terrible form, and it's just not safe. This is not about machismo. It's about safety and staying injury-free. Form first, every time, all the time. It is not worth throwing your back out or blowing your shoulder just to go heavier. And ideally, your last few reps should feel challenging. If you're doing 10 reps of something like a goblet squat or a chest press, rep 8 or 9 should feel like you are working. And by rep 10, you should feel like maybe you could do 1 or 2 more, but you'd really have to push to get them. So not painful, not sloppy, but challenging. Strength training should feel like work, not misery, not torture, just work. All right, and here is another question that comes up often when we're talking about lower body lifting, and that is this. What if my legs are stronger than my grip? This is extremely common. I've had many women share that for exercises like deadlifts, they know they can lift heavier weight, but their grip won't accommodate a bigger load. And it makes sense biologically. Your legs and your glutes are large, powerful muscle groups, but your hands are much smaller and they fatigue faster. So it's very normal for something like deadlifts or heavy barbell rows to be limited by your grip before your legs or back are actually tired. But you have options. One option is to train your grip strength directly. And you can train your grip strength with exercises like farmer's carries, dead hangs, and plate pinches. All of those will work the muscles of your forearm and hand to improve your overall grip. And the second option is to use lifting straps for heavier work. I have a pair of Versa grips that have lasted over 8 years already, and they most definitely make a difference when I'm doing heavy barbell deadlifts. Lifting straps work by transferring the weight load from the smaller muscles in your hands and fingers to the larger muscles in your wrists and forearms. So that allows you to lift heavier, pull more weight, and get in more reps before your grip fails. The straps also create a secure, direct connection to the bar, and that improves your stability. So then, when you have less strain on your grip, you can focus more on proper lifting technique instead of how much your hands hurt, or at least that was the case for me. Now, a third option you've got is to adjust the way you hold your weights. So more often, that means front-loaded positions. Things like goblet squats, where you're holding the dumbbell at your chest instead of holding weights at your sides. Or a front rack hold. So this is the position I think of for powerlifters and CrossFit athletes, where your elbows are out in front of you and your hands are upside down with a barbell loaded on the front of your shoulders. And the whole idea is to reduce the load on your hands, which can be more taxing if you're holding the weight down at your sides. And so of these options, the one I would suggest first is to train your grip strength. It's the most direct way to solve the issue because you're getting to the root cause. But I recognize that even with grip training, you may need alternatives, so you can use the straps or you can adjust your positioning for certain exercises. All right, and here's another question that comes up often. And honestly, I'm glad that it is coming up. The question is, how do you protect your joints when you're lifting heavier? And I love this question because it reflects an overall interest in lifting heavy, which is awesome because we should be striving to lift heavy. And 2, it means you're thinking safety. So I really do love this question. So how do you protect your joints? Well, there are a few simple principles here. First, you have to warm up your joints in addition to your muscles before you start lifting. That means simple things like shoulder circles, wrist circles and stretches, leg swings, hip circles, and most definitely lighter weight sets before you get to your working sets. So I'm going to veer off here for 1 second because I want to be sure to mention how important it is to make sure you're warmed up before you start lifting. I never go into a big, compound, multi-joint exercise like a squat, deadlift, chest press, or shoulder press and go straight to my max weight for the first set. I always do lighter warm-up sets first, and I most definitely recommend it for you as well. Lighter warm-up sets, they wake up your muscles, and they get you used to the movement pattern of the exercise you're doing. So I also use those warm-up sets as a way to gauge, how am I feeling today? There are days when some lifts are better than others, and I use those warm-up sets to get an idea of how awake I am, how sore I am from my run or my previous lift, or really just to check in with my body and see if anything feels funky. And I use all of that information to help me decide how heavy I'm going that day. So absolutely, 1 to 2 lighter warm-up sets before you start loading on the weight, that is essential. Okay, so back to protecting your joints. In addition to warming up your joints along with your muscles, I also recommend using a neutral grip when possible. So a neutral grip tends to be more joint friendly, especially for your shoulders and wrists. So what exactly does that mean? A neutral grip means your palms are facing each other, and that grip reduces strain on your shoulders, elbows, and your wrists compared to an overhand or an underhand grip. For example, if you're doing a shoulder press, you might typically see people pressing with their palms facing forward, and that is fine for some people, but for others, it might be irritating to their shoulders. And instead, you can take a neutral grip and have your palms facing each other as you press the dumbbells from that position. And many people find that much smoother, more natural, and less irritating. And you can also do this with exercises like chest presses too. Have your palms facing each other as you press the weight away from your chest. And that can be easier on your shoulders, especially when you're going heavy. All right, and then one other thing here to do to protect your joints is slow down your reps, especially on the lowering part of the movement. For example, if you're doing a squat or a press, take about 3 seconds on the way down, then come up normally. And that slower lowering phase does a few helpful things. First, it keeps you from using momentum, which means that your muscles have to do more of the work, which is exactly what we want when we're talking about building strength. And then second, slowing down gives your tendons and connective tissue time to handle the load. When your movements are fast and jerky, the stress on those tissues can spike very quickly, but a controlled tempo spreads that load more evenly. The movement stays controlled, the muscles stay engaged, and the stress on the joints is more gradual. And that makes the movement easier for your joints to tolerate. So to be clear, slower doesn't mean easier. It actually makes the exercise more effective and safer at the same time. And then finally, remember that pain is information. There is a difference between the burn you feel from your muscles working versus pain. If something hurts and it's sharp or one-sided or concerning in a way that does not feel right, adjust. Adjust the movement. Change the load, which usually means going lighter on your weight, or modify your range of motion. We are looking at quality over quantity here, okay? Higher quality reps with a lighter weight will always beat sloppy reps with a heavier one, okay? Now, let's talk about soreness, because this one also comes up a lot. This is a big misconception in fitness culture. We often think that soreness equals success. Like, if you're not sore the next day, the workout was not good enough. But soreness is not required for progress. What soreness usually reflects is that your body experienced a new stimulus. Maybe you tried a new exercise. Maybe you increased your weight. Maybe you added more volume. Or maybe you emphasized or slowed down the lowering part of the movement. And all of those adjustments can create a new or different stress to the muscle, which can lead to you being sore. But that soreness doesn't necessarily mean the workout was better or more effective. And here's something really important to know. Your body actually gets better at handling the same stimulus over time. So as you get seasoned in the weight room and repeat the same exercises and movement patterns consistently, you're going to be less sore, even though you're still getting stronger. And that is actually a really good sign. It means that your body is adapting. If you lift weights and you're sore the next day, that's fine, especially if something was new. But if you lift weights and you're not sore, that does not mean the workout didn't work or that it didn't count. The things that actually matter for strength progression are consistency, gradually challenging your muscles over time, and good technique. It's not how much you struggle to sit down in a chair the next day. And then one last thing I'll add that I learned from my own mentors about strength training and soreness. It's a general rule of thumb, and I come back to it all the time. If you are never sore, you might need to raise your intensity. If you are always sore, you might want to scale back your intensity. And again, there are no scientifically backed rules here on strength training and soreness, so I really like using that as a guideline. All right, now let's talk about how long your workouts should actually take. I want to make sure to talk about this because it comes up all the time. So many people assume that strength training is off the table because it takes too long and it gets too complicated in order to be worth it. That is not true. So for most people, 30 to 40 minutes of strength training is plenty. If you're efficient, you can most definitely get a very solid workout done in 30 to 40 minutes. And a simple structure for your workout could look something like this. So maybe you have a few minutes of warm-up, and that does not automatically mean that you have to get on the treadmill or the bike. You can certainly do that if you want to, but a few minutes of light cardio can raise your body temperature and get your blood flowing, but it's not required. Your warm-up can be as simple as mobility work or lighter sets of the exercise you're about to do. So for example, if you're about to do squats, you can start with body weight squats first, just to move through that range of motion. Then maybe you squat with a barbell or very light dumbbells before you start loading on the weight. Or if you're starting with shoulder presses, maybe your warm-up would include some shoulder circles, then you do some band pull-aparts, and then lighter weight presses before you get into your working sets. And the goal of your warm-up is pretty simple. It's just to prepare your joints, your muscles, and your nervous system for the movement you're about to do. It does not have to be complicated, and it definitely doesn't need to take long. Just a few minutes of intentional movement, that's enough, and it's designed to protect you from injury later, so I think it's totally worth it. And then once you're done with the warm-up, you've got 20 to 35 or maybe even 40 minutes of strength work. And in total, your workout might include anywhere from 4 to 6 strength training exercises of 2 to 4 sets each. And if you're thinking that's not enough, please let me reassure you. You do not need 9, 10, 12 exercises in order to get a good workout. There are days when I do 5 exercises, like squats, deadlifts, chest presses, rows, and shoulder presses. And that's it. And it's a solid workout. It's all compound multi-joint moves, and it hits all the major muscle groups. And when I'm pressed for time, I can get that done in 30 minutes if I have to. So you do not need a ton of exercises, and you don't need 90 minutes in order to get strong. An effective strength workout only requires a handful of well-chosen exercises that you execute with focus, good effort, and going heavy like we talked about earlier. So remember that building muscle is about how hard your muscles are working, not how many minutes you spend in the gym. So consistency, that matters way more than duration. All right? Now, let's talk about structuring your workouts. Another question that comes up all the time is how to organize your workouts across the week. So please know there are so many ways to go about this, and there is for sure no one right way to do this. But with that said, and in the name of simplicity, here are some simple ways to go about it. If you lift 2 days per week, you can do 2 full body workouts that are spaced at least a day between. Or if you prefer, you can split your 2 workouts into 1 upper body workout and 1 lower body workout. Now, if you lift 3 days per week, you can still do 3 full body workouts. Or you can separate it and do an upper body push day with chest, front shoulders, and triceps, followed by an upper body pull day with back, biceps, and rear shoulders, followed by a leg day. That is the most common way I approach it. This is how I lift when I do a 3-day split, and I feel like it's a pretty solid workout plan. And then if you're lifting 4 days per week, you can break it up even further into an upper-lower split. That could mean you do the upper body push, upper body pull pattern that I just described for the 3-day workout, but then you take your lower body workouts and divide them into 2 days, where one day is a squat pattern and the other day is a hinge pattern. So that's things like deadlifts. I know this is getting technical. I'm going to stop myself there. The key takeaway here is that the structure of the program really is secondary. There are so many different ways to break up your strength workouts throughout the week, but ultimately, consistency will beat perfect programming every time. And the best program is the one that is structured in a way that you can realistically stick to it. Okay? The next question that comes up often is what to do about strength training when you're recovering from an injury. I see a lot of women get stuck here, and often people fall into one of 2 camps. They either stop exercising completely, or they try to power through their injury and keep doing everything exactly the same as if they weren't injured, which ends up prolonging your healing. And usually neither of these approaches works very well. In many cases, the better approach is to adjust your training instead of abandoning it entirely. And first, this should go without saying, but if you've had a significant injury or surgery or something that's actively painful, you should most definitely be working with your physician for guidance first and foremost. What I am offering here is assuming that you've been cleared to return to activity. But in general, when someone is dealing with a minor injury or recovering from something that's improving, there's a few helpful principles to keep in mind. First, if something hurts, you don't have to stop everything, but you should obviously stop any movements that aggravate it. For example, if you have shoulder irritation and overhead presses are painful, you could replace those with things like rows or lower body work, core work, or a pressing movement that does not cause irritation. And a general rule of thumb here, if it's pain-free, you can train it, but lift lighter or modify. If the exercise increases pain, changes your form, or causes any kind of compensation, stop. Okay? Now, second, reduce the load or your range of motion. That means go lighter and reduce the range of motion of the movement so that it's not painful. Sometimes the exercise itself is fine, but the weight is too heavy or the movement is too deep or too wide of a range, and you can adjust both of those to prevent further aggravation. And then finally, remember that your injuries are often temporary. The goal during recovery is not to make huge strength gains. The goal really is to maintain as much function and strength as possible while you heal. Movement, it helps maintain strength and circulation and joint health, but we have to do it safely. So if you can still keep training other muscle groups and continue moving your body without pain, that can be helpful for recovery. And that means instead of all or nothing thinking, you think of it as adjust and continue. So you skip what hurts, modify what needs to be modified, keep what still works, and most importantly, give yourself time to heal and recover. All right? And finally, let's talk about pull-ups. I get asked all the time how to get to a pull-up. A lot of women want to be able to do them, but they're not quite sure how to get there. And it is a huge point of pride to do one. I didn't do one until I was 40, and that was with a lot of work, so I get it. So let's talk through this. Pull-ups, they require strength in your back, shoulders, arms, and core. And because pull-ups use so many muscle groups at once, they're an exercise that most people can't just jump into right away. It usually takes a little time to build the strength required to do a pull-up. So if they are a goal for you, it helps to think of them as something that you work toward in stages. And a realistic progression usually looks something like this. First, you start by building strength with horizontal pulling movements. So these are exercises like bent over rows, single arm dumbbell rows, or seated cable rows. And these are exercises where you're pulling weight horizontally relative to your torso, okay? And these exercises strengthen the muscles of your mid and upper back, muscles that help control your shoulder blades and support pulling strength. Then, once that foundation is there, the next step is vertical pulling. So this is pulling the weight vertically relative to your torso. So those will be exercises like lat pull downs or assisted machine or band assisted pull-ups. These exercises, they're a bit more challenging than the horizontal pulling, but they start to mimic the direction of the pull-up movement. And then the next phase is to help keep your shoulder joint stabilized under your own body weight. So this is where we're getting a little more challenging. This is going to be exercises like dead hangs, where you practice hanging from the bar and keeping your core engaged so you don't swing all over the place. And then scapular pull-ups. That's where you keep your arms straight, no bending, and practice what feels like pulling your shoulder blade back into the joint. This part is where a lot of people skip because these are small movements, but don't underestimate them because they are super important for both shoulder strength and grip strength. And then finally, the last phase is where you practice controlling your full body weight. This is where you do things like top holds, where you jump up and hold your chin above the bar for anywhere from 5 to 10 seconds, and then you drop down and you repeat. You can also practice eccentric pull-ups, where you jump up and hold your chin above the bar for a few seconds before you slowly lower yourself. And you will be shaking here, I promise. They are legit, they are challenging, and they are also one of the most effective exercises for building strength and getting you ready for pull-ups. The top holds, those are training your stability. The slow lowering of the eccentric pull-ups, that trains your strength. So those are the graded phases of exercises that will get you ready for a pull-up. And then once you understand that progression, the next question is, okay, so where does this actually go in my workout? Because most people are not going to build an entire workout around pull-ups. You're just going to add them into your upper body training. And a good place to do that is early on in your workout when you're still fresh. So for example, you might start with a few sets of assisted pull-ups or dead hangs or eccentric pull-ups, and then move on to the rest of your upper body exercises like rows or presses. If you're doing full body workouts a few times per week, you can just make it simple and include one pull-up progression exercise in each workout you do. And over time, as you get stronger, those progressions gradually turn into full pull-ups. So just like so many strength exercises, it's really about small amounts of solid, quality practice done consistently over time. And to give you an idea of how long this could take, well, for many women, an unassisted pull-ups takes several months of consistent training, and that is completely normal. It is a great strength goal. It just takes time, commitment, and a lot of patience, and you will get them, okay? There it is. These are some of the most common strength training questions that I get asked, along with answers. So whether you're lifting heavier weights, adjusting your workouts while recovering from an injury, or working towards something like a pull-up, the idea is really the same. Progress comes from showing up consistently and making small improvements that add up over time. You practice the movements, you challenge your muscles a little more as you get stronger, and you stay consistent with it. And if you take nothing else away from this episode, please remember this. Strength training does not have to be complicated. In fact, it shouldn't be complicated. It's meant to be fun and challenging. And remember that you do not need perfect programming. You need a solid program that targets all your major muscle groups. You also don't need to constantly overhaul your workouts either. Instead, what you need is consistency, progressive challenge, and patience. Lift a little heavier over time. Do the work regularly, and give your body time to adapt. That is how strength is built. All right? And if you want help with this, let's talk. If you're listening to this and thinking, okay, this makes sense, but I'm not sure how to put it all together, that's exactly what coaching is for. When you coach with me, we take the concepts we talked about today, like strength progression, workout structure, and consistency, and we apply them in a way that works for your life. Check out my website, send me a message at www.carriehollandmd.com/contact, and let's talk about how coaching can help you get stronger inside and out. All right? Thank you again for hanging out with me, and I'll catch you again next week. Hey, if you want to build muscle but don't know where to start, I've got you covered. Head over to carriehollandmd.com/buildstrength and download my free guide to help you maximize your strength training. Inside, you'll find the essential exercises for building muscle, plus simple 1, 2, and 3-day workout plans that you can follow with just dumbbells and a bench. You'll also find strength training tips to help you train smarter and see real results. My goal is to help you get strong, and this strength training guide will help you do it. Go to carriehollandmd.com/buildstrength and check it out. Thank you for listening to the Strong is a Mindset podcast. If you want to learn more about how to build both a strong mind and a strong body by eating, moving, and most importantly, thinking, check out carriehollandmd.com.